board was created as a direct response again to the global crash. The FSB, along with the G20 nations, launched the LEI initiative to tackle global systemic risk and transparency. So the LEI was directly brought to the table to tackle the issues that caused the financial crash in the first place. So moving forward to 2013, the LEI ROC was actually created as a governance body that oversees the LEI ecosystem. The LEI ROC works with global regulators, standard bodies, and other bodies within the global financial markets to help spread adoption and drive use cases and so forth. Moving forward to 2014, the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation, the GLEIF, were created, and this foundation was there to support LEI issuers, manage the data quality governance within the ecosystem, and again work with the wider markets to help drive further adoption across the ecosystem. So LOUs, also known as LEI issuers, who perform the validation, issuance, and management of LEIs. There are around 39 LOUs globally, of which only actually a handful issue on a global scale. Most tend to issue in their own jurisdictions. Moving from LEI issuers, you also have registration and validation agents. So these are approved organizations that work in partnership with LEI issuers to extend the LOU's capabilities and arms, essentially, to provide registration and management services on behalf of market participants. So if you were a legal entity, you have an option of going directly to an LOU or an LEI issuer, or you could work with a local registration agent who's able to help your LEI requirements moving forward. Of course, we can't also forget the 2.3 million legal entities that have been issued today. And we'll talk about a little bit more about where the ecosystem is moving forwards to. So just again, dialing things back before we move forward, what is an LEI and what does it look like? So essentially, the LEI is actually a 20-digit alphanumerical code. The code is assigned to a legal entity as a global digital ID. The first 4 digits are an LOU prefix. So as you can see here on the lower part, you have 5299 as the first 4 digits. That is Ubisecure's LOU prefix. So that's a way to identify us as an issuer. The middle 14 digits are the actual entity ID itself. And the last 2 digits are a verification ID as described in the ISO 17442 standard, which is the LEI standard. And just to finish the slide on that point, the LEI today is the only globally unique digital and standardized or globally standardized legal entity identifier. You have tens, if not hundreds, of other local identifiers that are used in today's world, but generally, the LEI is the only one that's actually backed by G20 nations and accepted on a global scale. So why is the LEI actually so helpful? So let's actually look into what the LEI captures. I like to phrase it as the LEI is a history book of a legal entity. Essentially, it captures all the changes and updates to data and when that data was changed. It captures legal names, jurisdictions, legal forms, entity types, and so forth. So essentially, also kind of creating a one-stop shop to understand exactly who this legal entity is, where they're based, what they do, and who they're owned by. Moving forward, the LEI ecosystem, the LEI itself also brings in other identifiers like the ISO code, the BIC, S&P Global ID. So other identity systems are also leveraging the data quality and the data that's within the LEI ecosystem for the benefit of making other ecosystems more data rich and so forth. As you can see at the bottom, it also captures the validated address of the legal entity itself and its HQ. Moving forward, the LEI, and I think probably one of the most unique points about it is the organizational structure via consolidation. So the LEI is able to promote the organizational structure, parents, branch relationships, fund relationships, subsidiaries, CHAOs, etc. And it all does it by consolidation. So where the rest of the ecosystem, rest of the financial markets tend to based risk and stuff like that off of UBO and beneficial owners. The LEI is actually focused around consolidation and what risks the organization presents instead of the individuals behind the organization. So again, rolling things back to the Lehman Brothers, if they understood exactly what their risk was from a consolidation point of view, we could actually be in a very different world today, because they might have been able to identify that they are in risky waters, for example. The LEI, again, I just want to drive this into people's minds, that the LEI is able to show who is who and who owns whom. So it provides that clarity on a parental and organizational structure level. Moving forward, so the next stage of the ecosystem, and a lot of people in trade finance and blockchain might have actually heard about this already, the VLEI. So the verifiable LEI can essentially enable organizations to understand who is who owns who, and who can act on behalf of who. So it's bringing individuals into the equation now. As you can see for the example on the screen, you've got the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation, so that's the GLIFE. And you can see that they've issued a VLEI to Stefan Wolf, who is the CEO. So theoretically, moving forward, Stefan could simply just provide his VLEI to another organization, and they could exactly understand who that organization is, where they're based, who they're owned by, and who is this person who's trying to represent this organization. The VLEI also captures many different capabilities like digital signing and stuff like that. So the GLIFE will also use the LEI in a digital signature format to sign off their annual reports, for example. So there's several different use cases of which the VLEI is able to actually bring further benefit on top of the LEI itself. So where are we today? You've actually got 294 global compliance and regulations that mandate or recommend the use of LEI. So for example, India, they actually recently released 2 mandates for the LEI, and they're planning on bringing out a 3rd mandate next year. So any transaction that happens in India, for example, above a certain threshold, now actually has to have an LEI present during that transaction. So it's just really great to see the adoption at this level from a countrywide basis. Even Australia, with their digital identity initiatives that they're working through today, they're also very much looking at the LEI as that core entity identifier, and even looking to remove the AVID code, which is a local ID, in replacement for the LEI as we move forward. I think that's due to happen in 2024. So also Europe as well, the European Central Bank, EIOPA, FAFT, ESMA, Bank of England, they're all starting to really push the LEI as the core identifier for legal entities. So it's really great to see these strong bodies behind it, really recommending and driving that LEI into their own ecosystems. Today, the LEI is primarily used in the financial industry, particularly the banking industry. As the adoption spreads outside of this, we will start seeing new and interesting use cases come up when the LEI is used as a digital identity. So identity access management, fraud detection, there's a whole different area of where the LEI can be brought into. And especially as we look into KYC and AML risk, all these processes within an organization really actually benefits from the clarity and the transparency that the LEI is able to bring. And we'll run over some stats about what the McKinsey & Company have found with the use of LEI within client onboarding and KYC and so forth. There's some pretty staggering figures. So I also wanted to touch on the fact that I suppose historically in the market, the LEI has mainly been driven by compliance and regulations. So there's almost been a feeling of the users of LEI that they're required to have an LEI due to X, Y, and Z compliance and regulations. Over the last 6 to 8 months, we're actually starting to see a shift of that to actually, I want an LEI. It's a willing adoption, which is really great to see. And as soon as more organizations start to willingly adopt the LEI, that's just when the ecosystem starts to grow even further and more use cases are coming to light. So with regards to the use of KYC, AML, risks, so these are one of the main drivers that are driving the willing adoption, is financial institutions just benefit from the transparency that the LEI brings. So I also wanted to touch on another point other entity identifiers like Dun& Bradstreet and tax IDs and so forth. They're not always necessarily validated by an external party. They are generally entity supplied only, meaning that the entity has the ability to supply that data, amend that data, and update that data as and when they feel. They aren't actually going through a validation process, whereas the LEI is externally validated by a network of LEI issuers that are governed by the Glyph data quality controls. So from a data quality point of view, the LEI brings that much more robust trust to the processes and the ecosystem. So what problems have the LEI solved so far? So I like using this term, banking the unbanked, for example. It's enabling legal entities, think about emerging markets, to have a global digital ID in order to meet trade and compliance and regulations, and essentially to increase their stability within the financial markets. It's giving legal entities that lack robust identity lack robust identity controls, and allowing them to take part in the global markets by purely just having an LEI. There's a famous saying in the ecosystem today: no LEI, no trade. This is actually starting to move towards no LEI, no business, but we're yet to get there. So yeah, as I mentioned, the LEI helps organizations of all sizes, whether you're a small MSME, SME, large corporate, bank. It just brings the transparency to every single level of organization that actually uses the LEI for X, Y, and Z. So when you're talking about transparency, that helps the how do I say this? It's helps the stability of these different markets, bringing that transparency of these entities that are acting within it, not just from a compliance and regulatory point of view, but from a reporting point of view, from a counterparty verification point of view. There's some real use that the LEI brings to the table. And just touching on the last point, the cost savings, you might have seen the 2 to 4 billion saving for banks' client lifecycle management. And this is actually a report that McKinsey did fairly recently, showing that the LEI just in the client onboarding process for the banking industry globally could save them 2 to 4 billion annually in just client onboarding costs alone. So there's a huge saving and operational efficiency gain for these kind of organizations that could use the LEI in their day-to-day operations. And we can again touch on this a little bit later on, but we work with several banks and financial institutions that are now starting to really take on the LEI and really push it internally. So yeah, it's definitely gaining some momentum, which is nice to see. So what are we actually working today? The ICC, for example, the International Chambers of Commerce, we're working directly with ICC, helping them really push the LEI adoption. Those guys actually represent 45 million companies over 100 different countries. So they are a massive force to drive these kinds of adoptions. The UK, for example, and Toby will touch on this a little bit later on in the presentation, but the UK is currently passing the UK digital trade bill, and that's currently going through the Houses of Commons. So, working with the ICC is really helping unlock the digital trade area and really driving digital transformation in those kind of areas where historically, you might have paper-based requirements and so forth. Moving forward to business registries. So yeah, we're working with quite a few business registries to help them manage their own databases, as well as apply a global digital ID to an entity when it's created. So it brings transparency from the start. So any entity can understand who this entity is and where they're based and who they're owned by from the immediate effect of when that entity was created, which I think is a really cool initiative. Validation agents. So banks and financial institutions, I touched on this just quickly in my previous slide. So banks and FIs are actually getting involved with the issuance and management of LEIs. not for their own operational benefit, but also for their clients. Their clients are subject to the same 294 global compliance and regulations that the banks are also subject to. So it makes sense for the bank to manage that for their client, as they are a natural trust provider, a digital trust provider. That they have so much robust controls and KYC and KYB and in-house. They might as well be able to apply a digital ID to their clients and themselves as well. For example, the US Customs and Border Protection. This is an example of where the LEI is growing outside of its traditional use cases. So the US Customs and Border Force are actually looking to pilot the LEI for import and export transparency. So it's really nice to see the LEI actually being used for import and export and identifying shipments, ships, who's sending who, what kind of inventory. So it's really unlocking that transparency on that kind of level as well. And as we move forward, again, I mentioned the VLEI previously. The VLEI is it's paving the way for the next stage of the ecosystem, based off of SSI, which is self-sovereign identity, digital identity. The digital identity that comes out of that enables the holder of that data or that ID to have the ability to manage their own identity and to be able to show that to whoever they want. So it's really about driving the owner of the identity or the data to have control of whom they want to share that data with and where. So the use of LEI within AML, risk, KYB, KYC, client onboarding, they all benefit from the use of LEI in the same way. The LEI brings that transparency, it brings that data quality trust. It's digitally readable, it's got API scalabilities. It's the only way to really drive identity or organizational identity on a large scale. So there's several different areas of which the LEI actually helps the onboarding and the risk analysis, the risk management, simplifying due diligence and so forth. Just touching on another subject again, Toby will touch on this later on in the presentation, but LEI in trade finance. The actual issuance of a letter of credit, for example, the McKinsey & Company came up with a report recently showing that just simply having the LEI within the issuance of a letter of credit could save the industry 500 million per year. So it's incredible to see these kinds of savings coming up just from a simple, cheap organizational identity. So let's take a look at the wider use or view of the LEI ecosystem. It's more than just a compliance and regulatory requirement. It's a highly assured organizational digital ID that is standardized globally. The LEI creates so much more opportunities for adoption and transparency outside of its traditional markets that it generally resides in today. Moving on to VLEI and identity organizational identity and access management. It creates the ability for individuals and organizations, customers, workforce, vendors, all of those kind of individuals and organizations that attach themselves to other organizations. It creates really nice streamlined governance controls that enables really simple, secure and authorization and access management for a better user experience or a better vendor experience, for example. So that's actually the end of my part of the presentation. I'm going to hand over to Toby, who's going to take it from here. And yeah, I'll put myself on mute.
Thanks, Dave. So LEI in supply chain and trade finance then. LEIs can be used to identify and track various entities involved in supply chains, including suppliers, manufacturers and retailers. This essentially helps improve chain visibility and help enable better risk management. So the LEI is a digital solution for supply chain management, providing standardized format to identify legal entities. By incorporating the LEI into digital supply chain systems, businesses can improve transparency, fraud, and increase efficiency. So many countries, as you probably are aware, and regulatory bodies require companies to report information about their supply chains, including the entities involved. So this is exactly where the LEI comes into its own. It can help ensure the compliance with these requirements, reduce the risk of fines, other penalties for non-compliance. It can also be used to track supplier diversity metrics too, such as percentage of spend with diverse suppliers. This can help organisations meet their supplier diversity goals. The LEI provides a standardised way of identifying identities. So in essence, to sum up, it improves data accuracy, better supply chain performance, and ensures smooth and secure flow of goods and services. Next slide. So specifically then, LEI and trade finance, there was a report done with LEI and McKinsey & Co. As we know, the commercial transaction life cycle is complex. Trade finance alone encompasses a broad range of products and services that facilitates international trade. It involves things like ordering goods, sending invoices, obtaining trade financing, producing the goods. The list is endless. It goes on and on, as we know. So the white paper found that the LEI would have the most considerable impact on the invoicing and trade finance element of this life cycle, which is outlined in this graph here. So Nathan touched on it earlier. The report showed a 500 million per year savings if the LEI was used in just the issuance of the letters of credit. Essentially, going back to what Nathan said to begin with, the LEI is the only identifier to explicitly show who is who and who owns who. So yeah, next slide. The Electronic Trade Document Bill, I'm assuming most of you here will have heard of it, knows what it is. Essentially, we're making sure that this legislation that's already in place, but just has the same legal footing, or the digital side has the same legal footing as its paper form, right? So, I guess everyone's been trying to solve digitization in trade for years, many years. The problem came with the private sector was that we couldn't scale it. And that's exactly what Chris Southworth, for example, at the ICC has done, has basically made this able to scale. And that's exactly what this bill does. So, interestingly enough, there's around 53 other countries that actually use almost word for word this same document bill. Also, another percentage, to be fair, there's two floating around the internet. Between English and Welsh law, it's either 60 or 80% of all trade documents use this globally. So that's quite a big percentage that use this. So yeah, what they're doing there is absolutely huge for trade in general. Next slide. So where are we today then? Here's just a quick screenshot. The links underneath. You can actually track this, the bill online. The first reading was actually done on the 12th of October 2022. So just six months ago. 23rd of March, so what was that, 7 days ago, it had its first reading in the House of Commons. So this is moving really quickly. And to my knowledge, the bill is actually in its final form now. All the iterations have been done, the changes, so they are literally, as it's going to be set, is how it is now. So, you know, a lot's come. We've come a long way for digital trade, the digitization of trade finance, supply chains. You know, once this bill gets passed, is it going to be an overnight change? Probably not. There's an awful lot of work still to be done, but what this bill does is it sets the stage for global adoption. It's able to scale. So what needs to happen next is those conversations then need to happen. You know, if the banks are doing these, the legal side, then they need to work out how they digitize that process for themselves. And again, corporations that don't use it and sub it out to fintechs, those conversations need to happen, how you deliver this solution. So a good couple of years, I think, before we really start to see this take place and everyone starts to get on board with this. What can you do between now and then? Get an LEI, right? It's a small fraction of the cost to really start this process. Recently, 2 days ago, the GLIFE contributed to the World Trade Board's new plan to drive greater access to trade finance for MSMEs, with their financial inclusion in the trade roadmap. Like most of these initiatives and digitalization for trade, there's a series of pillars which sets out their roadmap. The first one being digital infrastructure, right? So digital IDs, accelerating the adoption and growth, education of digital identities such as the LEI. So interestingly enough, MSMEs make up around 90% of business globally, but actually only accounted for 23% of applications in trade finance. That was from 2020. So yeah, quite some interesting statistics there. Next slide. So who's Ubisecure? What's Rapid LEI? Ubisecure, we're a world-leading identity and access management organization, specializing in SIAM and business-to-business IAM. Most recently, we became the world's largest LEI issuer. We now service more than 200,000 legal entities. We're #1 issuer for data quality, transfers into Rapid LEI, the volume of issuance, speed of issuance, and most amount of issued LEIs. Touching on the speed issuance, there's actually a YouTube video, we can actually issue in certain jurisdictions an LEI in 99 seconds. We are also the only LEI issuer as well to offer a full lifecycle management API. So what's the vision? We're going to tie together individual and organizational digital identities to create transparency and security for all. Next slide. So here we just got some charts which can actually be found on statistics website on our page. So as you can see, the first one, the new validated LEIs on a monthly issuance. So here it just captures 4 other LOUs, so LEI issuers. You've got Rapid LEI, GMEI, Bloomberg, and London Stock Exchange. You go up to the right is existing LEIs, so ones that already exist that are transferred into LOUs. Bottom left is the new validated LEIs. In the middle, you've got the issuance for Ubisecure Rapid LEI. So a nice steady upwards trend there. And then the last chart to the right is existing LEIs that are transferred out of LOUs. So to wrap it up, LEI G20 FSB backed, and they actually released a public statement stating to drive the LEI ecosystem to 20 million by 2027. So pushing for wider adoption globally into other industries. The LEI was a direct reaction to stop another Lehman weekend. The LEI ecosystem is saving industries billions annually, with various reports to prove and back those statements. Thank you very much. Next slide. So I hope everyone found it valuable. I guess we'll open up for questions. Thank you for listening.
Good. So we do have a couple of questions in the chat from Michael. I know, Nathan, you did answer one. He's also asking, so the banks or financial institutions is the authority validator?
So in GLIFE's pure validation agent model, that enables the FI or the bank or essentially any organization who is performing a deep regulatory client onboarding process to actually use that information in an LEI issue or in an LEI. So they can go to an LOU or an LEI issuer saying, we've onboarded this client, we've collected X, Y, and Z information, and we validated it. This is the information that's going to go to the LEI, and the LOU will issue as per that information. Just to answer the second question, I can see there. So a lot of these LEIs are used for single year. So for example, you've got some shops that might or organizations that might only need the LEI to buy and sell shares or to make a financial transaction. So that does tend to be a common trait throughout the ecosystem. However, when you think about it on the other side, from a compliance and regulatory point of view, when you have financial institutions and other organizations who are bound to keep these LEIs renewed, they have to renew year on year. So I think the renewal rate for the ecosystem is around 80–85%. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head. But yeah, a lot of them do get renewed because of either the willing use to have an LEI or for a compliance and regulatory point of view. But there are some areas where the LEI is only needed for one financial transaction or selling a stock or share.
So if you're a manufacturer and you're trading regularly or exporting regularly, you have to renew your LEI annually. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's when the refresh of data happens. So every renewal, the LEI will be updated with the latest and greatest information that is found on its corresponding business registry.
So if you're registering on March 30th, you need to renew on March 30th, kind of thing.
The following year, yeah.
Fantastic. We have any other questions?
If not, so we'll start with some thoughts, by the way, Nate. A practical one, actually, which for me, I would love to understand from a practical point of view, how to get on the LEI and what the process is for doing so.
Yeah, so to actually apply for an LEI, the process is fairly simple. You just need to supply either a registration agent or your bank, for example, if they're a validation agent, with your company data. You can also go directly to an LOU itself as well. So there's three different areas of which an organization can issue you an LEI that are our own approved body within the ecosystem. However, to put it simply, you give your business data to an LEI issuer or a registration agent, and they will validate that information. And if there's anything that mismatches or anything that they don't seem to be, that they don't think is correct, they'll come back to you in a bit of back and forth. However, if it's all matches and it all goes through perfectly, then the LEI will just be issued after that quick validation check. Yeah, streamlining it is just give us your business entity information, and we'll return an LEI code if it matches up with what's in the registry.
Cool, perfect. So coming down to your operativity, let's make an example. If a certain company, let's call it company A, enters into trade company B, and both parties are requested to perform a KYC and KYB on each other, does the LEI on its own remove that requirement? Can it be trusted on its own without providing any further corporate documentation? Does it stand like this? Does it work?
So not as it stands today. The LEI is part of that information and document requirements that are part of the counterparty verification. But with the likes of the Digital Trade Bill, ICC, the work that they're doing, it's starting to move definitely towards the just a single use of LEI. Say, hey, I want to validate you in this trade and make sure you're exactly who you say you are. Give me your LEI. Because during the process of the LEI validation, all of that information is checked anyway. So,
Christian.
Yeah, it's more about just trusting the LEIs to do the validation and just use the LEI instead of requesting further documentation.
So you mentioned, Nathan, earlier consolidation, right? Where you had the mothership and then potential other entities within that main organization, and then the CEO potentially. So from a person perspective, do you see a need for that to eventually trickle down? And I'll give you a oversimplified example, right? A truck driver, would a truck driver that reports into a XYZ company eventually need an LEI to identify that he's allowed to do certain things, or he has responsibility for certain things, or he's allowed to carry dangerous goods or certain commodities, right? Where do you see that trickling down?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Especially as we move into the LEI ecosystem, where you're actually assigning individuals to the organizational identity and their rights to represent that kind of organization. So definitely in the LEI, there's a plethora of different use cases, of which you could say, for example, a truck driver who's putting kind of special goods, or not all truck drivers are able to carry this kind of stuff. Then his verifiable credential is able to say, yes, I'm able to carry these kinds of goods, and I've been validated, and my organization says that I can carry this, so there's no need to do any further checks. I can just simply hand you my VLEI credential.
Right.
So it's streamlining areas like that. That's going to be the real impact on the day-to-day. Yeah.
By the way, wanted to ask you, what is your understanding?
I don't know. Oh, go ahead, Andrea.
Oh, no. If there is, I didn't see any other.
No. You were going to speak. Say something.
Oh my goodness, this man from Canada. No, I was just wanting to ask, what's your understanding of the legal entity identifier system, and how does it relate to trade finance and supply chain management? And related to this, how do you think the use of this technology in trade finance is changing the way that banks and other financial institutions are managing risk, ensuring compliance at the same time?
I think there's a very long answer to that question. Putting it in a short, simple answer, the LEI is able to bring the legal entity transparency and data quality trust to that those interactions, either within a business or with the counterparties within a bank, and so forth. So shorthand answer is the transparency and digital trust that the LEI brings to those processes.
So we have a question coming in from Ayan. Hey, Ayan, how are you? Or maybe not.
It's
nice to see some familiar names in the
absolutely
audience. Yeah.
I saw him request microphone access. Maybe let's give him a second. Not. Ayan, did you have a question? Maybe you can use the chat if you had a question, or the questions button. All right, maybe not. Any other questions?
I would invite to make some questions.
3, 2, 1. All right.
Yeah. Too shy.
Looks like
a shy audience
today. Oh, hold on and see something in the chat here. New to LEI. Hey, John. I think a lot of us are new to LEIs. We appreciate a bit of clarification here. Absolutely. Yeah, too shy. Yeah, people are shy. You can't be shy. Ask your questions.
It's certainly something that we experience in the ecosystem, because it's only been really spoken and adopted since 2014. It's still very much fresh as an ecosystem itself. So a lot of people might not even know what an LEI is, or have a slight interaction with it from a regulatory and compliance point of view. But there's a whole plethora of different areas and use cases for the LEI from moving on from that.
So where can people reach you?
LinkedIn is the best way, obviously via email as well. But LinkedIn is definitely where Toby and I are most active, and more than happy to chat with anyone and answer questions and have more interesting chats like this. This was really great.
Yeah.
You have to search for Toby, the LEI
so we have
guy.
a couple more questions that are popping up here in the chat. Is there planned collaboration with ISO 8000 standards?
I would have to look into what ISO 8000 is. I'm not too familiar with that, unfortunately. I know that there's ISO 17442, which is the LEI standard itself. We have ISO 2022, which is the payment standard, of which LEI is part of. As well, you also have ISO 5009, which was rolled out recently after the launch of the LEI, which is specifically to identify and standardize individuals who have a legal basis to act on behalf of an organization. So, for example, the ISO 5009 would enable people to standardize the way that they're able to represent themselves on behalf of a company.
And if you want to read up on ISO the 8000, Michael's put some, and John have put some links in the chat. So yes, it is around data quality, and it's something that we see a lot in supply chain, and we need a lot in supply chain. For
sure. I can touch on the LEI Ecosystems data quality super quickly. The LEI work and the Glyph govern data quality really strictly within the ecosystem. So us as an LOU and all the other LOUs that have to abide by these issuance policies, they are very strict, and any mistakes or data quality issues that are issued, they're very hot on our heels to make sure that is corrected. So just purely for example, Ubisecure's data quality score in the ecosystem is 99.99%. So we're very close to being perfect on every single LEI, but obviously there's so many different edge cases out there with regards to legal entities, their setups, what kind of jurisdiction they're in, and so forth. So data quality is a huge part of the ecosystem.
Okay, I can. The message is by Michael, by the way. Nathan, Toby, just one more question from my side. You see, we here talking about blockchain, which is the scope basically of this association, but we're also hearing about other related technologies such as IoTs and artificial intelligence, machine learning. How do you see all these new technologies, including LEI, the future of supply chain and trade finance, collaboration all together? What's your perspective, and how LEI can step in also in the picture?
I can definitely share my point of view. Toby, you might want to also jump on and see if you can share your point of view. I don't want to be answering all of these questions.
No, that's fine. But I guess initially, right, the LEI is machine readable. So from an AI machine readable point of view, that the identifier is readable from that side. So not only, the benefits from that alone are huge. Did you want to elaborate?
Yeah, so from a real world identity perspective as well, the LEI is able to bring that real life kind of entity identifier that everyone else and all the other markets use to bring that into blockchain, which is typically a very anonymous and identity-less world as it stands today. There's a lot of privacy and data concerns around the blockchain ecosystems, and the LEI is able to bring that legal entity or individual and representing a legal entity information back into the ecosystem to provide that on-chain kind of identity assurance.
So, Michael, I'm not sure I understand your question. Does your identifier include I's and O's and ones and zeros? See.
Yeah. So but it's just legal entity reference data. Obviously, with regards to address passing and stuff like that, there will be digits in there. But generally, the LEI is issued in the same the same language as it is shown in the business registry. There are other areas within the LEI that has a transliterary name. So, for example, if there was an LEI that was issued in Arabic or any other different language, there would be another field just underneath to have its English transliterated name. So the formatting in the ecosystem is again, backed by G20. It's used globally, so it tends to capture all those requirements.
Yeah, John is raising a good point. How do you protect against counterfeiting?
Counterfeiting LEIs.
So if I find out the LEI of somebody else and use it for my own nefarious purposes, how do we protect against that?
Yeah, so the VLEI is that answer. Being able to say I'm this person and I'm able to represent this company. If someone else was trying to present that kind of credential, it would be immediate to understand that they're not that person who they say they are. So that would be my first answer. In regards to fraud and counterfeiting and stuff like that. So from an SSL or website point of view, having the LEI or the organizational digital identity in that digital trust solution just also brings more emphasis of the legal entity behind it. So think about the last transaction that you did with last transaction that you did. Was it with a legal entity or was it with an individual? It's probably likely that it's going to be a legal entity like Amazon, eBay, whoever. But you're authenticating yourself to them when you log into their shopping cart. It looks like your shopping cart, it looks like your order history, but there's no authentication back to the individual saying, yes, I am Amazon, yes, I am eBay. So the LEI is bringing that organizational identity, so organizations can identify themselves to the individual user of that or a client, of that kind of organization. So yeah, it's just again, bringing transparency,
which is a good thing.
Yeah.
All right, folks. We are coming up 5 minutes before the hour. Do we have any last few questions?
I wanted to ask last.
No, not from you. I didn't say you could ask questions.
Guys, help me stand this dude from Canada. I mean,
Go ahead, my friend. I'm kidding.
I know. So seriously, guys, we are. I mean, if you following us, we see how much we are into sustainability-related topics in this association, and also in the Hyperledger SIG. How do you see LEI being a sort of enabler into the sustainable development goals? How can this technology step in as a major actor in achieving those goals? What's your take into this?
Tobe, do you want to take that one?
So I didn't hear the question, if I'm honest.
So LEI and sustainability and driving ESG and stuff like that.
ESG. So I actually did a newsletter on my LinkedIn about ESG reporting, which you can head over to my LinkedIn. There's a whole report on it. There are certain factors in which the LEI can play in ESG reporting. Obviously, as we know, ESG is becoming quite important. A lot of it is down to tracking various entities when they have to, large corporations with multiple different sites worldwide, is tying up all these entities via an LEI, and then which will then give you accurate data for the ESG reporting. On the environmental side, there has been figures around the 2 to 4% carbon emission savings for using LEIs in certain procurements. So yeah, I'll have to dig out the exact numbers, but there's around 2 to 4% for the environmental savings.
Well, Toby, for a guy who has COVID, I think you're doing a great job. Thank you very
Thanks,
much. Thank you very much as well. Great
It's been a
information.
struggle.
We're learning a whole lot.
Get better soon, by the way, Toby. We want you
Thank you.
in a perfect shape.
So with that, folks, we thank you very much for joining today. I hope you grabbed the slide deck if you wanted that. We made that available in the handouts. If not, we'll send you an email with the recording to our YouTube channel once that's up, probably early next week. Once again, to our guests, Nathan, Toby, thank you very much for enlightening us and me, because yes, I did learn something. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Toby. It was really great talking to both of you. Looking forward to
any last words before we close the session?
No, I thank the attendance, especially I thank the two speakers. They were really great. Nate, Toby, it's a huge honor for me to speak with you, and let's keep on doing so. I mean, constantly as the global picture evolves, we're into this together. So, guys, let's go ahead.
Definitely. And I just wanted to finish up saying, if anyone has any further questions and stuff like that, they can reach me and Toby on LinkedIn or via email. We're more than happy to chat and answer any of your concerns or questions. So feel free to reach out.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Have a nice evening, guys.
Take care. Thanks so much for having us.
Goodbye.
Cheers.
Guys.
Bye.